Hi, thanks for tuning in to the 95th episode of Congressional Dish. I'm your host, Jennifer Briney. Today's episode is going to be a special episode about trade agreements, specifically the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is a package of international regulations being negotiated in almost total secrecy, which your Congress aims to fast-track into law. This is one of the rare episodes where I'm going to tell you about something that's about to happen, because if you decide you don't like it, you have a chance to stop it, and I'm going to tell you how. But before we jump down this rabbit hole, I'd like to remind you to please keep in mind that this episode of Congressional Dish, and every episode of Congressional Dish, is only possible because of you. This show doesn't accept advertising money like most of the other shows you watch and listen to. Instead, it depends on you voluntarily paying what you think is fair for the value you receive from the show. It's the honor system here. If you learned something new today, or if Congressional Dish helps you understand what's going on in this seemingly crazy world a bit better, please contribute whatever amount you think that information, understanding, or peace of mind is worth. It doesn't have to be a lot, and you have lots of ways to do so. We have buttons for PayPal and Bitcoin. There's also an Amazon search box if you'd like to give the show a commission, and we have a P.O. box where you can send physical checks. All of these options are listed for you on the support page on congressionaldish.com. However much you decide to chip in, thank you. I cannot keep this up without you. So, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. The Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP, is the name for a package of international regulations being negotiated behind closed doors between the United States and 11 other countries that border the Pacific Ocean, including Canada, Mexico, Australia, New Zealand, Malaysia, Singapore, Japan, Peru, Vietnam, Brunei, and Chile. This agreement is being kept secret from the public, but it has been reported by various news outlets that representatives for approximately 600 multinational corporations have access to the text and are able to give their input. The only reason we peasants know anything about what's inside the 29 TPP chapters is because 3 of those chapters have been leaked by the angels at WikiLeaks, with the latest one coming just a few weeks ago. The latest leak is of the January 2015 version of the TPP Investment Chapter, which I read and will share the details of during this episode. But I guess I should start by telling you why we're talking about this today. The vast majority of Congressional Dish episodes are about bills that have already passed at least one branch of Congress, but with the TPP, there is no bill. Nothing has even been introduced yet during the 114th Congress, so what the hell? Why are we talking about an international agreement that hasn't seen any action in this Congress yet? Well, we're talking about this today because Politico reported that the Senate is planning to introduce a fast-track bill for trade agreements on Monday, April 13th, the Senate's first day back from their 2-week Easter break. 2 days later, in the Senate Finance Committee, they're planning to have a hearing on that fast-track bill, and then they're going to mark it up for a vote on Tuesday, April 21st. This is lightning fast for a Senate bill, which indicates to me that if this is, in fact, their plan for fast track, then the leaders of this Congress are going to try and ram it through before any of us pesky citizens get a chance to mobilize to shut it down. I'm hoping to make that a little bit harder by telling at least a few thousand people that this is happening before they start ramming it through. The spokesman for the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, Senator Orrin Hatch of Utah, told Politico that they want this done, quote, this spring, unquote. And the next meeting of TPP negotiators is at the end of May, so I suspect that that's their ultimate deadline for getting a fast-track bill through both parts of Congress and signed into law. And we have a choice to make. Do we want to let this happen or not? Now, this is probably the point where you're thinking, but Jen, what the fuck is fast-track? Why should I care? And those are excellent questions. So actually, the name of what's happening is not actually fast track anymore. It's called Trade Promotion Authority. And that's the relatively new official name for fast track, which I guess is because fast track was just too honest of a name. Basically, Trade Promotion Authority, or TPA, is a temporary law that's been repeatedly authorized by Congress, which allows the executive branch, the president's branch, to write international regulatory agreements with other countries while notifying and consulting with Congress, but taking away Congress's right to amend the actual agreement. Also important, under the TPA fast-track process, congressional debate on the new international regulations is limited. Instead of getting to amend the international regulations and debate them for as long as Congress sees fit, Congress would only get an up or down vote on implementing the agreement. Either the whole agreement becomes law or none of it does. 11 trade agreements since 1974 have been approved using this fast-track process, and the latest TPA fast-track law expired on July 1st, 2007, which is why this needs to be rammed through now if President Obama wants to avoid Congress, the people's branch of government, fucking with the TPP. And it's extremely important to know that while we will focus on the Trans-Pacific Partnership today because it's almost done, if a new TPA fast-track bill becomes law, TPA fast-track would be the process for all international regulation agreements for as long as the TPA fast-track law is in effect. Michael Froman, the U.S. Trade Representative, said in a January hearing that in addition to the TPP, they're working on a regional free trade agreement with Europe called the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership Agreement, or TTIP, and 3 more agreements that I know nothing about called the Information Technology Agreement, the Trade and Services Agreement, and the Environmental Goods Agreement. A good question here is why would Congress want this? And make no mistake, even though TPA fast track takes away power from Congress and gives it to the Kenyan in the White House, the Republican leaders in Congress, they do want it. Here's Senator Orrin Hatch, the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee. That's the committee that's expected to introduce, hold a hearing, and make available for a vote a TPA fast track bill next week.
President Obama's strong call for TPA in the State of the Union was welcome, though in my opinion, it was long overdue. I hope that he'll follow his latest call to action with a real concerted effort to help us get TPA through Congress. Here in the Finance Committee, we're doing all we can to help in this effort. Although the bill I introduced last year with Chairman Camp and Baucus received broad support, I am currently working with Senator Wyden to see if there's a way to address some additional issues that he has raised. We're working with Chairman Ryan as well. And while there may be some improvements we can make to the bill, I want to make one thing clear. The time for TPA is now.
It's really a strange thing for Congress, which is supposed to represent the public, to be pushing for. Not only does the fast-track process allow international regulations, which trump our laws, to move faster, but going through this process allows these legally binding international laws to be labeled a Congressional Executive Agreement instead of what it really is, an international treaty. Now, I don't quite understand the legal gymnastics involved in this, but somehow the fact that the regulations would be enacted through an implementing law, that up and down vote that I told you about, somehow that implementing law allows these not to be considered treaties. And the reason this is important is because if these were called treaties, then 2/3 of the Senate would have to vote yes for the regulations to pass, instead of a simple majority. Which means that the TPA fast-track process makes passing international regulations much easier. Also, TPA fast-track allows the process and contents of the agreement to remain secret by avoiding multiple amendment rounds in Congress. Basically, Trade Promotion Authority, or fast-track, whatever you want to call it, allows international regulations that trump our laws to pass faster, easier, and with less information given to and debated by the people's representatives. Now, I know all of this sounds very sinister, but I truly don't think that the people who are doing this are evil or are trying to screw anyone over, even if that is the result. I'm guessing that many of them think they're doing good by ramming through these agreements, and I think I'm starting to understand why they're doing it. Now, before I tell you what I think is going on in the big picture kind of sense, I want to put a big fat asterisk over the statements I'm about to make because I'm still trying to figure this out myself. This entire podcast is me trying to figure out what's really going on both in this country and in the world, and I'm doing it out loud. So I guess what I'm saying is I reserve the right to change my mind on this anytime I want to. But as of this moment, what I'm starting to think is going on, big picture, is that there is a group of global elites, for lack of a better label, who make their money via stock market dividends, whose social circles do the same, and who control our government from both within the government and by buying our politicians with campaign contributions. I think this group of people who truly believe what's good for the stock market is good for the world are trying to write the rules for what will eventually be a global economic system modeled by this so-called free market system we have here in the United States, and which we've been pushing on countries around the world for at least the last 50 years. One of the reasons I think this is because of a book I read recently while researching our national defense strategy. The book is called The Pentagon's New Map, and it was written by an insufferable narcissist named Thomas Barnett. During the key Bush years, from 9/11 to the invasion of Iraq, Thomas Barnett was the Assistant for Strategic Futures in the Office of Force Transformation at the Department of Defense. According to Barnett, he was summoned to come to work at the Pentagon while the 9/11 towers were still smoldering. He got the job because for years before 9/11, he directed something called the New Rule Sets Project, which brought together the Pentagon and Wall Street to draw new maps of power. And he basically laid out a plan for the war on terror, and more importantly, a reason for it. In 2004, just after leaving the Bush administration, he published the Pentagon's New Map, which became a New York Times bestseller, and according to journalist Nafiz Ahmed, quote, "It has been read far and wide in the U.S. military by senior defense officials in Washington and combatant commanders operating on the ground in the Middle East," unquote. I decided to buy this influential book when I saw that Representative Mac Thornberry of Texas, the new chairman of the powerful House Armed Services Committee, was quoted on the back cover and in the inside jacket. I believe that to understand what someone is doing, it's good to read what they read. And so that's what I did. Basically, in his book that's been read by all these people in the military, Barnett divides the world into two groups. One is the core, which we belong to. Core countries are described as functioning, and according to Barnett, quote, "To describe a country or region as functioning is when it seeks to harmonize its internal rule sets with the emerging global rule of democracy, rule of law, and free markets," unquote. The rest of the world is part of what he calls the gap, which are dangerous places that need to be transformed. The idea is that eventually everyone should be a part of the core because, in theory, countries that trade with one another don't go to war with one another. By economically tying together the world, there will be peace, even if war is needed to make that peace happen. Orwellian, I know. Barnett says, quote, "Our model of future peace prevails as long as our willingness to wage just wars does not falter. America's gift to the world is not military empire, but economic globalization and the collective security it both engenders and demands," unquote. Because we have the world's largest military, by far, America's role in this is to be the, quote, "system administrator," unquote, of these new economic rule sets. He says, quote, "America's role in providing globalization security is merely removing from the playing field those actors who willfully disregard its emerging rule sets," unquote. Which explains why we're involved in changing the economic systems of countries all over the world. Ukraine, Iraq, everywhere in South America. He says, quote, "We must encourage the spread of legal rule sets, which over time establish the conditions under which economic development and, later, democracy can flourish," unquote. So democracy, getting to choose our own laws in our individual countries, comes second, after adherence to the international economic rule sets. And how are those international economic rule sets created? Barnett says, quote, "Outside of military alliances, the United States needs to continue doing exactly what U.S. Trade Representative Robert Zoellick has advocated and pursued over the past several years. Bilateral free trade agreements, regional free trade agreements, and global free trade agreements," unquote. Now, in case you doubt that our global military strategy and these trade agreements are connected in this way, here's our new Secretary of Defense, Ashton Carter, speaking at the McCain Institute at Arizona State University 5 days ago.
But TPP also makes strong strategic sense, and it's probably one of the most important parts of the rebalance, and that's why it has won such bipartisan support. In fact, you might not expect to hear this from a Secretary of Defense, but in terms of the rebalance in its broadest sense, TPP is as important to me as another aircraft carrier. It would deepen our alliances and partnerships abroad and underscore our lasting commitment to the Asia Pacific, and would help us promote a global order that reflects both our interests and our values.
So Thomas Barnett was hired by the Pentagon to help it transition the military into the systems administrator for these economic rule sets. And now, 10 years later, the United States has 14 free trade agreements in effect with 20 countries. Most of those are between the United States and one other country, bilateral agreements. We've also made it to the second stage, regional agreements. First with the only free trade agreement you've probably ever heard of, NAFTA, which enacted regulations governing the United States, Canada, and Mexico during the Clinton years. Then we enacted an even bigger regional agreement during the Baby Bush years called CAFTA, which regulated the United States, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, Dominican Republic, and Costa Rica. The TPP overlaps some of these countries we've already made legally core, but TPP would expand the rule sets to Brunei, Malaysia, New Zealand, Vietnam, and Japan. With every administration, the agreements just get bigger and bigger. If my math is correct, enacting the TPP would bring the total number of countries legally bound to our international rule sets up to 25, and that leaves us with 170 or so countries left to go. And like I said earlier, they're working right now on an agreement with the 28 European Union countries, TTIP, which would also be fast-tracked under TPA fast-track legislation. Now, I don't necessarily think that having rules for the world is a bad thing. After all, we're more connected now than ever before. The internet is a thing. We can talk to and do business with strangers anywhere in the world because of it without having to move anything other than our fingers. And along with that ability comes the shipping of crap everywhere between countries with very different safety and environmental standards. And we also have weapons that are so powerful that we humans have the ability to kill just about everything on Earth with the push of a few buttons. Under these circumstances, rules governing this rock hurtling through space that we all call home are not a bad idea. However, it matters what those rules are. So the question now becomes, what are the rules? What is in this system that they're putting into place? And that's a tough question to answer because they don't want us to know. Like I said before, the TPP is thought to have 29 chapters, which I can't say for sure because we're not allowed to see the text as they're working on it. The only reason we know as much as we do is because of WikiLeaks. About a year and a half ago, WikiLeaks leaked 2 of the draft chapters. One was about the environment and one was about intellectual property rights, patents and copyright type stuff. The environmental chapter actually wasn't all that interesting, but the intellectual property chapter was, and there were some causes for concern. For example, there was a provision that aimed to let copyright owners, so Hollywood studios, television networks, etc., it would let them work together with internet service providers, so Comcast, Verizon, AT&T, to police copyright infractions over the internet, possibly giving those companies the legal ability to cut people off from the internet. The governments of any of these countries wouldn't need to provide any proof to make this happen. They would just have to write the internet service providers a letter. So for example, if I used copyrighted sound clips in this show and pissed off some letter writer in the government, I could be taken off the internet by Comcast, the only company I have the option to use in this building. And then goodbye, Congressional Dish. It seems like a power any government or big company would love to have. We also found out that the United States is pushing to allow patents of plants and animals. And I can't help but think of Monsanto's freaky corn. Monsanto's freak corn has something in it that makes it resistant to Monsanto's Roundup Ready poison, which means that when you spray the corn with the insecticide, the corn survives, but the little critters who are eating it and the weeds living around it will die. Monsanto patented their freak corn so that farmers would have to buy seeds from Monsanto year after year after year. And according to Monsanto, they've already sued 147 United States farmers who kept the seeds from the corn they purchased to plant the following year. Farmers who, farmed the way humans have for millions of years. Most farmers just paid Monsanto and made the lawsuits go away. But the 9 cases that went to trial all awarded money to Monsanto because of their patent. Based on this bit of recent U.S. history, do you think that an international regulation allowing patents of plants and animals is one written to protect farmers and their small businesses? Or is it written to protect the profits of multinational corporations? And remember, these are international regulations being crafted here. So middle America, having to pay Monsanto for your seeds is bad enough. But how would you feel about a foreign company preventing you from planting your own damn seeds? And those aren't the only patents. The leaked TPP Intellectual Property Chapter also told us the United States wants international patents for methods of doing things. Things like surgeries. So if a hospital in Australia figures out how to treat a cancer that you have here in the United States, but your hospital or insurance company doesn't pay the Australian company for that information, well, I guess you're gonna die. And here's another provision where you have to ask yourself, does a rule protecting the rights of companies to make money forever off of techniques and methods that they develop, does that protect me or does that protect profits? Who are these rules being written for? So that's what we learned a year and a half ago from the leaked intellectual property chapter. And because the text is secret, I can't tell you if or how it's changed. But a few weeks ago, we got access to 56 pages of more recent text, thanks once again to WikiLeaks. What they gave us this time is the draft text of the investment chapter from January of 2015, just 3 months ago. And this chapter answered some very big questions. First, quite literally first, it was on page 2, we found out for certain that the text is deliberately being kept from the public in all of our countries, and get this, it's going to remain secret for 4 years after these international regulations become law. Now, I know that sounds insane, so let me read you exactly what it says in the text. Page 2, the heading is, quote, declassify on, unquote, and it says, quote, 4 years from entry into force of the TPP agreement, or, if no agreement enters into force, 4 years from the close of the negotiations, unquote. So we can't even see the text for 4 years if it fails. They don't even want us to know what they're trying to do in the TPP. That's insane. And the other big revelation in the investment chapter, the huge revelation in the investment chapter, is that yes, the investor-state dispute system is definitely a part of the TPP. The investor-state dispute system is one of the craziest things I have ever heard of. It's a court where companies can go to sue governments if those governments enact laws that affect their businesses. The way this judicial system for corporations and governments is set up in no way mirrors our own judicial system, which was created to guarantee the rights of the people in the Constitution. The investor-state dispute system is an arbitration system, and the TPP says that by signing this not a treaty, every country agrees to use the investor-state dispute system to settle legal disputes. The way this is structured is that each court, known as a tribunal, has 3 judges called arbitrators who decide the cases. The arbitrators are picked from a pool of qualified lawyers who often represent the corporations when they're not serving as judges. Could there be conflicts of interest? I think so. One of the arbitrators will be from each of the countries that are a part of the case, and the third arbitrator, who will be the head judge, will be picked by a compromise between the 2 countries or companies involved in the case. If they can't compromise while selecting their own judge, the head arbitrator will be appointed by the Secretary General of the Center for Settlement of Investment Disputes, which is part of the World Trade Organization. Right now, that's a woman named Meg Kinnear, a Canadian who you have absolutely no way to hold accountable. What happens during the tribunal hearings? I have no idea. But after the tribunal arbitrators make their decision, there's no limit on the amount of tax money that our government may be ordered to pay the corporation. And the tribunal also has the power to order that we give the corporation its property back. We lose the ability to have the final say over what happens on our own land. And that is the final say, because there is no appeal process. It doesn't exist. What the tribunal says goes. Now, an interesting little side note here is that Australia is apparently refusing to participate in the investor-state dispute system unless some conditions are met. Those conditions aren't listed, but it's good to know that at least one of these countries is fighting this corporate court. And why do I call it that? Well, let's look at how the investor-state dispute system has already been used, because that's right, folks, it's already a thing. It was part of NAFTA and CAFTA, and TPP would simply expand it. One case that's happening right now has to do with the safety of our roads. A group of Mexican truckers, Canacar, sued the United States after our Congress wrote a law during the Bush years saying that Mexican trucks had to meet specific safety and environmental standards before they'd be allowed to drive on our highways. Congress enacted this law after some Department of Transportation studies revealed severe safety and environmental problems with Mexico's fleet of trucks and their driver's licensing procedures. Canacar claimed that our law violated a NAFTA regulation, which is also included in the TPP Investment Chapter. This regulation basically says that each country must treat companies from foreign countries exactly how they treat their own. The Investor-State Dispute Tribunal ruled in favor of the Mexican truckers and told the United States to let their dangerous trucks and drivers onto our roads or we'd face sanctions. Facing this reality after the investor-state dispute system ruling, the Obama administration signed a 3-year pilot program into law in 2011 that allowed the Mexican trucks to drive on our roads, even though none of the safety and environmental concerns had been fixed. Those 3 years have passed, the pilot program is over, and if you're listening to this, you clearly survived. But now Canacar is trying to get our government to pay $30 billion of our taxpayer money to compensate the Mexican truckers for requiring that their clunkers get off our roads. $30 billion. For that much money, we could do Boston's Big Dig all over again, fuck-ups and everything, and still have $6 billion left over to pay for 40,000 kids to go to the most expensive private colleges Boston has to offer. Or we could give that tax money to Mexican truckers. What would you rather do? Another provision in the January version of the TPP Investment Chapter says that countries are not allowed to nationalize their industries or change the property rights of foreign companies in their countries. Although there is an exception in here that says that it can be done for a, quote, public purpose, unquote, as long as the country pays that company the market value of that industry plus interest. But the public purpose clause either wasn't included in NAFTA or it has no teeth, because this clause was used to get money from Canada after a company voluntarily closed their business. Ataibi Bowater, a paper company, closed a paper mill in Canada, which cut off the incomes of 800 Canadian citizens in that town. After the paper mill no longer existed, Canada reclaimed the water and timber rights on that land because their contract with the paper company said that the paper company would only have the rights to those things as long as they were operating a paper mill, which they were not. The paper company sued Canada in the investor-state dispute system. Canadian taxpayers then paid the paper company, which had just laid off 800 people, $122 million to settle the case and go away for good. Another case from 2007 was brought by the Railroad Development Corporation against Guatemala. In 1997, Guatemala foolishly privatized their railroad system and contracted it to a subsidiary of the Railroad Development Corporation. The corporation won the contract by promising to rehabilitate the entire network in 5 phases. After 8 years, they had only completed 1 phase. Guatemala started the legal process to fire the Railroad Development Corporation for their crappy job performance, saying that their plan was, quote, injurious to the state, unquote. Despite the fact that the contract wasn't actually canceled, the Railroad Development Corporation sued for $64 million in future anticipated loss of profits and won, with the tribunal saying that the claim was essentially baseless as no property rights were actually changed, but the threat was unfair treatment. The tribunal forced Guatemalan taxpayers to pay the company an additional $18.6 million. Another investment chapter provision says that we can't require that parts be bought locally as a condition for being allowed to do business in our country. Basically, what that means is that requiring a foreign company to buy American to do business here would be internationally illegal. The investment chapter also says that we can't condition our subsidies, handouts of our government money and/or tax breaks, on buying any percentage of goods locally. They're telling us what we can and can't do with our own government investments. An example of this is an investor-state dispute system case from 2011 brought against Canada by Mesa Power Group, a Texas wind power corporation owned by T. Boone Pickens. The lawsuit challenged Canada's Green Jobs program that pays better rates to solar and wind power providers that source their equipment locally. T. Boone Pickens and Mesa Power Group is suing Canada for $746 million, trying to get paid for having done literally nothing. The case is ongoing. Now, one bit of good news here is that there is a provision that says that we can require local workers be hired in exchange for subsidies. There had to be something good in here somewhere. But, back to bad, there's also a provision that says that we won't be able to enact laws that require extracted resources to stay in our country, extracted resources like water and fossil fuels. For example, this clause would have shut down an idea that was floated a lot during the Keystone XL pipeline debate, which was requiring that if our country was going to assume 100% of the spill risk from the pipeline, which it would, then we could at least require that the oil and gas be sold exclusively to Americans in return for taking that risk. That option would be off the table with the passage of TPP. So that's really the bulk of the big stuff from the investment chapter of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. But let's get back to why we're talking about this today. We're talking about this today because your Senate is planning to come back from their 2-week vacation on Monday to work on a law that would fast-track this agreement and others, which have been created in secret and which we know have some serious issues from the little bit of text we've been lucky to see. And let's recall what fast-track does. Basically, fast-track allows international regulations, which trump our laws, to pass faster, easier, and with less information given to and debated by the people's representatives. If you don't like the sound of that, the question now is, what can you do about it? Now, obviously, one option is to do nothing. Doing nothing will pretty much guarantee that fast track happens. It's the one thing that President Obama and the Republicans in charge of Congress agree on. Remember new Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell's press conference from the morning after the Republicans won the Senate in the 2014 election?
What are a couple specific examples of things that you think you can work with President on?
Yeah. Trade agreements. The President and I were just talking about that right before I came over here. Most of his party is unenthusiastic about international trade. We think it's good for America. And so I've got a lot of members who believe that international trade agreements are a winner for America. And the President and I discussed that right before I came over here, and I think he's interested in moving forward. I said, send us trade agreements. We're anxious to take a look at them.
And now it's on the agenda. And you can be sure to expect a bullshit campaign over the next few weeks to convince us that Trade Promotion Authority, TPA, Fast Track, is a great idea. Here's Chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, Senator Orrin Hatch of Utah, on January 27th.
Now, to succeed in getting TPA renewed, we will need an all-out effort by the administration to make the case for why TPA is so vital to our nation's ability to fairly engage in international trade and to enhance the health of our own economy.
And then the bullshit parade began in February. You know who this is.
And as we speak, China is trying to write the rules for trade in the 21st century. That would put our workers and our businesses at a massive disadvantage. We can't let that happen. We should write those rules. That's why Congress should act on something called Trade Promotion Authority. This is bipartisan legislation that would protect American workers and promote American businesses with strong new trade deals from Asia to Europe that aren't just free, but are fair.
However, this is not inevitable. If you're against this, you are not alone. Here's what happened when U.S. Trade Representative Michael Froman started to speak at the January 27th Senate Finance Committee hearing.
As we work to open markets around the world,
we're not telling the American people the truth. We know that the Trans-Pacific Partnership has been negotiated and secret for 5 years. You're trying to rush it through Congress with fast track because it's secret and you know the things in there are going to hurt the American people. They're going to offshore our jobs and lower our wages.
Let's have order. All right, remove this person from the room. If anybody else does this, we're going to be removed.
You're not going to allow us to protect our workers from poor working conditions. You are not going to get fast track. The American people are against it. They're against the TPP. No secret trade deal.
We're saying stop fast track.
No TPP.
No. We don't want supersized NAFTA. We don't want employees losing our jobs. We don't want undermining the party with this fast tracking to Congress. We believe in democracy, not secrecy.
No
TPP. We want transparency.
No TPP. No TPP. No TPP. No TPP. No TPP. No TPP. No TPP.
All right, let's take them out. We'll just now look, the committee will be in order. Comments from the audience are inappropriate. They're out of order. If there's any further disruption, the committee will recess until the police can restore order. And let me just say this. I understand that some people have strong feelings about the subject we're talking about today. That's fine. The First Amendment guarantees your right to express your views, but we have to allow civil discussion to occur in the context of this hearing. So for our people who are protesting, I ask that you respect the rights of others, respect this committee, and remain quiet so the hearing can continue. And we would appreciate having the signs removed as well. Show some courtesy here. But we're not going to put up with it, and if we have to recess this committee, we will, which would be a shame, but and we'll recess until order is restored. So let's have no more of that. And I ask our Capitol Hill Police to make sure that we don't have any more of this type of activity. Ambassador Froman, we turn the time back to you.
I'm a retired shipyard worker, and my job was shipped overseas, along with thousands of other Baltimore ships.
You're not representing your people properly. No, you're not. Take him out. You can.
You lie. That's a fraud. Big business, corporate secret deals, costing America jobs.
You're not helping your case. I can't help right now. Okay, Ambassador, Mr. Ambassador.
Well, as we work to open markets around the world.
If any signs go up again, we're going to throw you out of the meeting too. So let's just stop the cheap politics. Mr. Ambassador Froman.
Well, at least Hatch was a bit more polite to the pesky public than John McCain was.
Get out of here, you low-life scum.
The point I'm trying to make here is that if you don't like this, you are not alone, my low-life scum. There are already people around the world trying to shut down these deals. Just Google TPP protest in Google Images, and you'll see pages of protest images in different languages from around the world. And as a United States citizen, you have more power than any other citizens in any of the other TPP countries because you are a citizen of the country that is leading the effort. And the first thing we should try is to shut down Fast Track, shut down Trade Promotion Authority. The results of doing that, which I can see, are that the agreement might be amendable by Congress. That would mean that if TPP and all the other agreements are going to move forward, it's going to take a lot longer to get the regulations settled because the U.S. Trade Representative would have to take Congress's changes back to the negotiating table for as many times as they have changes. And I have no problem with that. Crafting international regulations that prevent us from enacting our own laws should be carefully done in Congress, in the people's branch of government, and we should get as many edits as we damn well please. And yes, I know the vast majority of us don't like our current representation in Congress. But as irresponsible and downright crazy as some of our congressmen are, at least we get to hire and fire them. That's more than we can say for whoever the hell is writing these regulations behind closed doors with a 4-year guarantee of secrecy. Another repercussion that I can envision if fast-track legislation is stopped is that TPP might not become international law, which again, I can live with. Regardless of how good an idea it may be to have a set of rules that the whole world adheres to, I don't like the process of the TPP, and I have serious concerns about its contents, especially the investor-state dispute system. It matters what the rules are, and frankly, from what I've seen, I think these rules suck. I'm just fine starting the process over to craft rules that are designed to protect people from the greed of corporations, and not to protect corporations from the laws written by the people. Now, the key to doing this is going to be pestering the hell out of our senators specifically, because that's where this bill is first being introduced. To pull this off, we have to really freak them out, the same way we did with net neutrality. And the good news is that this is an issue that exposes the red versus blue, liberal versus conservative, Republican versus Democrat divide as the steaming pile of dog shit that it is. Party will tell you nothing about how your senator feels about Fast Track or the Trans-Pacific Partnership. There are Republicans who want it, and there are Republicans who don't. There are Democrats who want it, and there are Democrats who don't. They can be freaked out on this one. So much about TPP doesn't fit the partisan storyline. Republicans want to fast-track new global regulations. Democrats are writing international regulations in secret, the same types of regulations that allow corporations to move their operations out of the United States in search of the world's cheapest labor. This doesn't fit the partisan narrative. This is an issue that they will have to face as individuals, and that works in our favor. And so what can you do? Well, this is the best part. You can make a huge difference without ever even leaving your couch. You have 2 senators, and all I want you to do is call and write them. The more times, the better. Now, if you've never called your senators before, don't expect your actual senator to pick up the phone. That's never going to happen. Instead, you're going to end up talking probably to an intern. Please be nice to the intern. There is a good chance that that intern has no idea what the Trans-Pacific Partnership even is. Your goal in that phone call is to get that intern to write down no to fast track or no to TPP on their piece of paper, because all you are doing is adding a vote to the unofficial tally that they're going to report to their supervisors, which then gets reported to your senator. Now, I don't know how much they can keep track of who's calling, so call over and over again. Call first thing in the morning, get it out of the way. Call every time you stop work to pee. Call when you're bored. Call drunk in the middle of the night and leave them a message. And then record that message and send it to me. The point is, though, that the more you call, the more no's to fast track they write down. It's a numbers game. The more no's recorded by the interns, the more freaked out your senator gets, and the less likely it is that your senator is going to want their name in the I category when the fast track vote is counted. Now, when it comes to emails, I assume they can keep track of how many come in from the same person, but who cares? Email anyway. Make it short and make it often. Again, you want the intern to understand your message, not your entire worldview. Don't write novels. They don't care. Get your message across in the easiest and quickest way possible. The point is to get the intern to write down no TPP or no fast track, whatever's more important to you. And also, don't forget social media. Many senators are on Twitter, and most of them have Facebook pages, which are great to comment on because they're public. Every post is just as good as a call or an email. They all end up in the tally. Now, a little bit higher on the effort and effectiveness scale, you can also write physical letters and send it with a stamp, which not only lends a hand to our screwed over post office, the only company in America that has to fund its employees' retirement 75 years in advance, but I also imagine that it's the most likely to be read by your actual senator, since it's something that could end up on their desk or be picked up and read because it's just laying around the office. And then there's the ultimate, most effective thing you can do, which is show up at your senator's district office and talk to the intern in person. It seems obvious that a person is serious about an issue when they physically get off their ass. And for the record, I've never done this, but there's a first time for everything. The point is, though, that this trade agreement thing is super important. People who you didn't elect are writing secret international corporate rights regulations and expanding an international judicial system that awards tax money to companies and prevents us from determining our own local laws with no process for appeal. That right there, big problem. If you agree with me, let's be giant pains in our senators' asses and shut the fast track bill down. You can find your senator's contact information at www.senate.gov.
A suit steals millions, but he's never caught. Folks up on the hill, they're easily bought. Oh, baby, I want to change the world. Now a mom steals baby food just to feed her child. She does 20 years now. Ain't that wild? Oh, baby. I want to change the world. I want to change the world, but it takes two. Let's get together, honey, me and you. You know we can make a difference in the world if we start today. I want to see my future in a whole new way.
All right, so now I want to thank the people that make this podcast possible, and I'm going to fly through this today even faster than usual because I'm leaving for New Media Expo and the Podcast Awards in exactly 15 hours, and clearly I'm not even done with this episode yet, so I need to finish. I need to go quick. But that does mean that I'm going to be in Las Vegas next week, and that isn't great timing because this is when all this fast track, trade promotion authority stuff is going to be going down. And so I will keep you guys updated on Twitter. I'm obsessed with Twitter. I can't help myself. And so that's where I'll be retweeting anything that I read and giving you updates on what's going on. That's also the place where you guys can help me out if you want to and let me know what you're seeing, because obviously I'll be in conferences and doing other podcasts and, drinking probably. It is Las Vegas after all. So, so let's communicate with each other on Twitter and keep each other up to date on what's happening in the Senate. All right, so let's start off with our new subscribers. First and foremost, we have a new subscriber, Ken Nagel, who is now contributing $51.80 per month, which means that we have had quite a bit of competition for the silver position in the Congressional Dish arms race lately, and Ken has now overtaken Samir Reyna and Logan Harrison, who have been bumped down to bronze with their $50 a month subscription. So, to recap, in the Congressional Dish arms race, the gold position holder for right now is David Hunter, still with his $100 a month contribution, which is proving to be a tough one to beat. Ken Nagel is now in the silver with $51.80 per month. And we now have Samir Reyna and Logan Harrison sharing the bronze with $50 per month. And John Cote, sorry, buddy, but you're off the podium. You had a good run, though. I should mention that one of the people sharing the bronze is Logan Harrison. He's also a new subscriber, and so that's how you're now sharing the podium with someone else. Contributing $20 a month, we now have Kendall Foshi and David Cunningham. Thank you so much, guys. $15 per month is the most popular new subscription for for these last few weeks. We are now getting that from Ashwin Pereira, Justin Hurdle, Zach Litchfield, and Daniel Mieselman. Thank you so much. We're also getting $10 a month from Lindsay Almond. Thank you, Lindsay. We're getting $7.50 a month from Doug Heaton. Thank you, Doug. We're getting $6 a month from John Lazars. Thank you, John. We're getting $5.45 per month, which is the most interesting subscription number so far, from Mallory Reagan. And she also contributed $20.88 as a one-time contribution. She said that this show is fascinating and horrifying her, which I totally understand. It does that to me all the time. Last, we also are getting $2 a month from Stephen McWhorter, which is $1 per episode, which is awesome. So thank you to all of the new subscribers. One of my goals, I may have told you this already, I don't know. I think I told everyone in the emails, but I'll say it out loud. One of my goals for New Media Expo is to figure out what I can do in my process, to get a virtual assistant to help me with a lot of the busy work that takes up my time. Just taking the new subscribers and contributors' names and putting them in a spreadsheet this morning took me 2 hours. And that's ridiculous. That is time that is much better spent on researching and doing these episodes. So I'm going to hire someone to help me, and I'm going to figure out how that's going to work in the next couple of weeks. And your subscriptions, it's all because of the subscriptions, honestly, because that's how I know I'm going to have enough money coming in every month to actually pay this person. So you guys are awesome. Thank you so much. You are going to make this show better in a very real way. But that does not mean that I don't love my one-time contributors. You guys make a huge difference too. It's just a little more inconsistent, but it's great to have, and it helps me afford things like these trips that I'm going on, these conferences, which every time I go to a conference, I've got to tell you, the show gets 10 times better because I get a better idea of how to do it. So you guys are so crucial too. And first off, I want to thank Ahmad Sheikh, I hope I'm saying that right, for your $200 contribution. Thank you so much. You are the winner of the week. We also got $100 from Jonathan Manella. Thank you so much for that $100. Coming in, the most popular contribution, one-time contribution for the last few weeks has been $50, and that was from Greg Westney, Maggie Vincent, Stephen Bai, and Dennis Adams, who told me that he is contributing because he doesn't like advertising and he wants to prevent a paywall. And that's the best way to prevent a paywall, is to chip in voluntarily on the honor system. So thank you, Dennis. You've made a big difference. We also got $40 in Bitcoin from Gene Everett. Gene has been a big supporter of the show, contributing more than one time and being my friend on Twitter. So thank you very much, buddy. That was great. We also got $20 each from Alexander Bone, Colin Ferguson, and Yolanda Bejanaro. Bejanaro, one of those. But Alexander, Colin, and Yolanda, thank you. We also got $17.89 from Mario Soto. Thank you, Mario. We got $15 from Dwayne Fields. Thank you, Dwayne. We got $13 in Bitcoin from an anonymous contributor. So thank you. We also got $10 each from Aisha Yakub, Larry McCollum, John Crows, and Paul Carignan. Did I screw that up? Carignan, or it's Kerrigan. I may have just typed that too fast. Either way, Aisha, Larry, John, Paul, thank you. You're awesome. We also got $5.55 from Jason Matos, $5 from William Williams, awesome name, $5 from Martin Callahan, and then last we got $2 in an anonymous Bitcoin contribution. So thank you to everyone who pitched in to make this episode possible. Like I said, I can't do this without you. If you want to join this elite club of amazing people who are honorable and know how the honor system works and learn something from this show and are helping to keep it going, all you have to do is go to the support page on congressionaldish.com, click on the PayPal or Bitcoin buttons. You can use the Amazon search box every time you shop, which gives Congressional Dish a commission, or you can send checks to the Congressional Dish P.O. Box, which ensures that Congressional Dish gets every penny of your money and nothing gets siphoned off by PayPal. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I also want to let you guys know that I'm still working through the emails that I got during the Reddit AMA, and there were just hundreds of them, so I haven't been able to respond to all of you guys yet, but I am working on it. I've responded to everyone, I believe, who has written to me before March 25th. But if your email came in on March 26th or after, I still haven't gotten to yours yet, but I will get back to you, I promise. And also, Andy, I got your message. I will call you back when I get back from Vegas. I've been completely swamped, but I am super excited about what you told me, and I will talk to you soon. Very stoked. All right, so that's it for this episode. The next episode is most likely going to be the March bills. I am going to start working on those right when I get back from Vegas, and I'll have those for you by the end of the month, along with an update, obviously, on the Trans-Pacific Partnership stuff. I mean, that's obviously very important, so I'll let you know what's been going on. Maybe Matt and I can even squeeze in a hearing if they do, in fact, have that hearing on the 15th. I don't know. No promises. But I am working on the March bills. We will get those read, and I will get that episode out to you as fast as I possibly can. All right. Thanks, guys. I will talk to you soon. Bye.
Oh, we're surrounded now by liars coming at us through our TV screens.
We don't have a domestic spying program.
They're content to fight in black and white despite of any in-betweens. We got a president who plays with the facts. And then he waves a flag to cover his tracks. As if a lie is alright, if the end will justify the means. Now we are so damn tired of being lied to.
The polar ice caps aren't going away.
We don't think we can deny it anymore. You can stick to your story if you think it lies. But we're not keeping quiet anymore. We are so damn tired of being lied to.
Government jobs consume the profits of the private sector.
We don't think we can deny it anymore. You can stick to your story if you think it flies. But we're not keeping quiet anymore. Now we're not keeping quiet.
These bills represent common sense, bipartisan solutions that actually solve problems.